Have you ever poured everything into someone who kept pulling away, reaching, explaining, trying harder, giving more, only to watch them retreat further the closer you got, until you started to wonder whether the problem was you? We've all felt misunderstood in a relationship, but loving an avoidant is a particular kind of exhausting, because the harder you try to close the distance, the wider it gets. And nobody ever explained to you why your effort was the very thing pushing them away. That's why this channel exists. At the Relationship Blueprint, we explain the mechanics underneath the patterns, the actual psychology, not the games. And today, I'm going to show you something that sounds like a trick but isn't. Why avoidants so often come back the moment you genuinely stop needing them to. Not as a manipulation, as a real shift in you that changes everything about how they respond. We're going to walk through the 5 shifts that pull an avoidant back toward you when you stop chasing. But I have to be honest with you, because almost every video on this topic lies to you about it. There is one type of avoidant this will not work on, no matter what you do. And if you're dealing with that type, chasing or not chasing will both fail. At minute 9, I'll show you exactly how to tell which type you're dealing with before you waste another year of your life. By the end of this video, you'll understand the real reason stepping back changes the dynamic, how to do it without it being a manipulation, and how to know whether the person you're waiting on is ever actually coming back. Starting today. Welcome back to the Relationship Blueprint. Subscribe if you're new video every week. Before we start, I want to be clear about something. This is not a video about how to manipulate someone back. It's a video about understanding why distance does something to an avoidant that closeness never could, and what that means for you. Let's get into it. Before the 5 shifts, you need to understand the single mechanic underneath all of them. Because once you see it, everything about your situation will make more sense. When you chase an avoidant, you are not bringing them closer. You are activating the exact defense system that makes them pull away. Here's why. People with an avoidant attachment style learned early in life that depending on someone was unsafe, that reaching for comfort led to rejection, or being overwhelmed, or being let down. So they built a strategy to survive. They learned to not need anyone. Psychologists call these deactivating strategies, the automatic ways an avoidant shuts down their own attachment needs to feel safe. When you pursue them, when you text more, ask for more closeness, push for more reassurance, their nervous system doesn't read it as love. It reads it as pressure. And pressure triggers the deactivating system. They withdraw, not because they don't care, but because closeness itself feels like a threat to their autonomy, which their whole survival strategy is built around protecting. Important reframe. Your pursuit and their withdrawal are not 2 separate problems. They are one feedback loop. The more you chase, the more you trigger their defenses. The more they withdraw, the more anxious you get and the harder you chase. You are both trapped in a cycle where your love and their fear keep amplifying each other. Stepping back is not a tactic to win them. It is the only thing that breaks the loop. This is the work of attachment researchers going back to Bowlby and Ainsworth, and it's well documented in the modern attachment literature. The avoidance withdrawal is a deactivating strategy, an automatic, mostly unconscious move to restore the feeling of safety that closeness threatens. And here is the part that changes everything. When the pressure is removed, the deactivating strategy has nothing to push against. The wall comes down on its own because there's nothing to defend against anymore. That's the mechanic. Now let's look at the 5 specific shifts that happen when you genuinely step back, and what each one does inside the avoidant you've been chasing. Chasing an avoidant doesn't fail because you're doing it wrong. It fails because the chasing itself is what triggers their retreat. The distance you're afraid of is created by the very effort you're making to close it. Stay until minute 9, because everything I'm about to tell you comes with one massive exception. There is a type of avoidant who will not respond to any of these 5 shifts, and chasing them or not chasing them makes no difference at all. Knowing which type you're dealing with is the single most important thing in this entire video, and I'll show you how to tell at minute 9. Shift 1 of 5. You stop applying pressure. The wall loses its purpose. What changes in you? You stop pursuing. You stop the extra texts, the bids for reassurance, the conversations about where this is going. Not as a cold punishment, just a genuine release of the pressure you'd been applying without realizing it. What happens in them? The avoidance deactivating system has nothing to push against anymore. The wall they built was a response to your reaching. With the reaching gone, the wall loses its purpose. For the first time, being near you doesn't feel like a demand, and in the absence of pressure, something they couldn't access under pressure becomes possible. Curiosity about you. The psychology. Deactivating strategies are reactive. They switch on in response to perceived demands for intimacy. Remove the perceived demand, and the strategy quiets. This is why avoidants often report feeling most warmly toward a partner precisely when that partner has stopped trying to get close. The warmth was always there. The defense was just blocking it. Here is how to do it for real, not as a tactic. This only works if the stepping back is real, not performed. If you stop texting, but check your phone every 30 seconds waiting for them, they'll feel the pressure anyway. Avoidants are exquisitely sensitive to it. The release has to be genuine. You're not going quiet to make them miss you. You're going quiet because you've stopped chasing something that was hurting you. Shift 2 of 5. Your absence becomes information. The silence they finally notice. What changes in you? You go quiet, not as a game, but because you've genuinely turned your attention back toward your own life. The constant stream of your presence, which they'd come to take for granted, simply stops. What happens in them? Here's the paradox at the heart of avoidant psychology. They need space to feel safe, but they also rely on knowing you'll be there when they return from that space. When your presence was constant, they never had to value it. It was a given. When it goes quiet, your absence becomes the first piece of information that breaks through. They notice the space you used to fill. And noticing is the beginning of missing. The psychology. This is the dynamic some clinicians have called the avoidant awakening. The moment a long-pursued avoidant registers that the pursuit has stopped. Because their attachment system was suppressed under the weight of your pursuit, it could only reactivate once that weight lifted. Your withdrawal is what finally lets them feel the attachment they'd been deactivating all along. Here is how to do it for real, not as a tactic. Do not engineer your absence to be noticed. The moment it becomes a performance, posting strategically, going quiet but hovering, it stops being absence and becomes another form of pursuit, and they'll feel it. Genuinely redirect your attention to your own life. The noticing happens on its own, or it doesn't happen at all. You cannot fake your way into someone's longing. Shift 3 of 5. You become a secure base instead of an anxious pursuer. Safety replaces demand. What changes in you? You stop being the source of pressure and start being a source of calm. When you do interact, you're warm but not grasping, present but not demanding. You've become someone who is steady whether or not they reach back. What happens in them? Avoidants are not actually repelled by closeness itself. They're repelled by closeness that feels like it will swallow their autonomy. When you become genuinely secure, warm without neediness, available without demand, you become the rarest thing to an avoidant, closeness, that doesn't threaten their freedom. That is the one kind of intimacy they can actually approach. The psychology. This is the heart of what attachment researchers call earned secure attachment, security developed in adulthood through deliberate inner work rather than inherited from childhood. A securely grounded partner is regulating to an avoidant's nervous system because they offer connection without the engulfment the avoidant fears. You stop being a threat to their independence and start being a safe harbor for it. Here is how to do it for real, not as a tactic. This is the shift that cannot be faked, because it isn't a behavior, it's a state. You can't perform secure. You become it through the genuine work of no longer needing this person's response to feel okay about yourself, which is exactly why this shift is the one that actually changes everything. By the time you've done the inner work to become a secure base, you're no longer dependent on whether they come back at all. Shift 4 of 5, you reclaim the life you'd put on hold, the gravity shift. What changes in you? You pour the energy you'd been spending on chasing them back into your own life. Your friendships, your goals, the parts of yourself that went dormant while you were preoccupied with someone who kept leaving. What happens in them? When your whole world was oriented around an avoidant, you were easy to take for granted. Your availability was total, so it cost them nothing. When your life refills with its own gravity, you become someone with a center that isn't them. And paradoxically, that is when you become most magnetic, because a person with a full life, who chooses to make space for someone rather than orbiting them, is far more compelling than a person who is endlessly available. The psychology. There's a reason this works, and it isn't mind games. A person anchored in their own life is displaying exactly the trait avoidants most respect and most struggle to find threatening: self-sufficiency. You become someone they can be close to without fear of engulfment, because you so clearly don't need them to complete you. Your fullness makes your closeness safe. Here is how to do it for real, not as a tactic. Reclaim your life for yourself, not as bait. If you rebuild your world while secretly hoping they'll see it and come running, your life is still secretly about them, and that hollowness is detectable. The goal is to genuinely reinvest in yourself to the point where their return would be welcome, but not necessary. That's not just attractive, that's freedom. Shift 5 of 5. You hold a boundary without punishing them. Respect replaces resentment. What changes in you? You stop being endlessly accommodating. When they reach back after going cold, you respond. But you don't instantly erase the distance, abandon your plans, or pretend the disappearing didn't happen. You hold a calm, non-punishing boundary. What happens in them? Avoidants often lose respect for partners who have no boundaries because limitless accommodation reads to them as a loss of self, the very thing they fear most. When you hold a steady boundary without weaponizing it, you demonstrate that you have a self that doesn't dissolve for them. That self-respect is something an avoidant can actually respect in return. And respect for an avoidant is often the doorway to desire. The psychology. Boundaries communicate, in the language an avoidant understands best, that you are a separate, sovereign person, not someone who will engulf them, and not someone who will disappear into them. That separateness is reassuring to an avoidant nervous system. The boundary isn't a wall against them. It's proof that getting close to you won't cost them themselves. Here is how to do it for real, not as a tactic. The line between a boundary and a punishment is intention. A boundary protects your well-being. I'm not available to be picked up and dropped, but I'm genuinely glad to hear from you. A punishment is designed to make them suffer, going cold to teach them a lesson. Avoidants feel the difference instantly. Punishment confirms their fear that closeness is dangerous, while a clean boundary proves the opposite. Quick pause. If you've been caught in this cycle for a long time, doing the inner work to become genuinely secure is hard to do alone, and it's exactly the kind of work a therapist trained in attachment can accelerate enormously. I'll put some ways to find one, including low-cost options, in the description. Now, the part I promised. The one type of avoidant none of this works on, and how to tell if you're dealing with them. This is the part I promised in the hook, and it's the part almost every video on this topic refuses to tell you, because it's less satisfying than the fantasy that anyone will come back if you just do the right things. They won't, and you deserve the truth more than you deserve the fantasy. Avoidant is not one thing. There are two very different types, and the difference between them determines whether everything I just told you will work, or whether you're waiting for someone who is never coming back. Type 1. The fearful avoidant, the one who comes back. Fearful avoidance, sometimes called disorganized or anxious avoidant, have high avoidance and high anxiety. They're torn. Part of them craves closeness desperately. Part of them is terrified of it. They pull away, but they feel the loss when you're gone. They are the avoidants who come back, because underneath the avoidance is a genuine anxious attachment that reactivates the moment the pressure lifts. When you do the 5 shifts, a fearful avoidant feels the space, misses you, and is pulled back toward you by the anxious side of their wiring. Everything in this video is built for them. Type 2. The dismissive avoidant, the one who often won't. Dismissive avoidants are different in one decisive way. They have high avoidance but low anxiety. They genuinely don't get anxious when you stop pursuing them. Where the fearful avoidant feels the loss of your presence, the dismissive avoidant often feels relief, space, calm. The thing your absence is supposed to make them miss is the very thing they wanted most. So when you step back, you're not triggering longing in them. You're giving them exactly what they were looking for. This is the truth that almost no video will tell you, because it doesn't sell hope. When research looks at this directly, the finding is consistent. Dismissive avoidants, with their high avoidance and low anxiety, frequently do not come back when you stop pursuing. Because the mechanism that brings a fearful avoidant back simply isn't present in them. There's no anxious attachment underneath to reactivate. Stepping back doesn't create a void they need to fill. It creates a peace they were always seeking. So here is how to tell which type you're dealing with. Because this is the single most useful thing in this video. Ask yourself, when you've pulled back before, even briefly, did they ever reach for you? Did your distance ever seem to pull them back, even a little? A fearful avoidant will have shown you flashes of this, the disappearing then returning pattern, the hot and cold cycle, the reaching back when you finally went quiet. A dismissive avoidant shows you something different. A steady, low anxiety drift away, with little evidence that your absence costs them anything at all. If every time you've stepped back, they've simply receded further with apparent ease, you may be waiting on a dismissive avoidant. And the kindest thing this video can do is tell you to stop waiting. And here is the part that matters even more than which type they are. Important reframe. Whether or not they come back is not actually the most important question. The most important question is whether the relationship was ever giving you what you needed. Because the 5 shifts have a secret. By the time you've genuinely done them, released the pressure, rebuilt your life, become secure, held your boundaries, you will have outgrown the need to chase anyone. And from that place, the question stops being, will they come back? And becomes, do I even want them to? That is the real destination of this work, not their return. Your freedom. Fearful avoidants come back when you stop needing them, because the longing was always there under the fear. Dismissive avoidants often don't, because there was no anxious longing to reactivate. But the work that would bring one back is the same work that frees you from needing either, which is why you do it for yourself, and let their return be a possibility rather than the point. Here's what I most need you to take from this video, and it's not a technique. Everything I've described works because of one underlying truth. The moment you genuinely stop needing an avoidant to choose you is the moment you become someone an avoidant can actually choose. But notice what that requires. It requires you to actually stop needing it. And you cannot fake that. You cannot perform not needing them as a strategy to make them need you, because the need is still there underneath and they'll feel it and nothing will change. Which means the only version of this that works is the version where you do it for real, where you genuinely turn back toward your own life, rebuild your own security, and arrive at a place where their return would be welcome, but their absence would not destroy you. And here is the beautiful, frustrating paradox at the center of all of it. By the time you've actually gotten there, you won't need them to come back. And if they do, you'll be choosing them from strength instead of clinging to them from fear. And if they don't, you'll be okay, because you rebuilt the thing that was actually broken, which was never them. It was the part of you that believed you needed someone who kept leaving in order to be whole. So do the 5 shifts. But do them for you. Release the pressure because the chasing was hurting you. Rebuild your life because your life deserves rebuilding. Become secure because you deserve to feel secure regardless of what anyone else does. Hold your boundaries because you're worth them. If a fearful avoidant comes back to that version of you, wonderful. If a dismissive avoidant doesn't, you've lost someone who was never able to meet you anyway, and you found someone far more important. Yourself. Stop trying to become someone they can't leave. Become someone you don't need them to stay for. That version of you is the one an avoidant is most drawn to, and the one who no longer rises or falls on whether they are. If you've watched this far, you're clearly someone who wants to understand the real psychology instead of chasing tricks. And that's exactly the person who actually gets free of this pattern. So let me point you to where to go next. Becoming a secure base, the 3rd shift, the one that changes everything, depends on one thing most people never learn: how to give and receive love in a way the other person can actually feel. Because here's what trips up even people who've done all the inner work. They finally get the avoidant to come closer, and then they love them in a language the avoidant can't receive. And the whole cycle starts again. The closeness arrives, and they don't know what to do with it. The love languages framework is how you make sure that when an avoidant does come closer, you can actually build something that lasts, instead of recreating the same disconnection in a new form. It's the practical foundation underneath everything we covered today. Watch that video next. Subscribe to the Relationship Blueprint. New video every week. The moment you stop needing them is the moment everything changes. For them, maybe, but for you, certainly. And you are the one who matters most in this story. I'll see you in the next one.